Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we are reviewing 4 bills related to public land administered by the Bureau of Land Management. BLM, as it's known, manages 247 million acres of public land, or about 10% of the country, under the multiple use mandate outlined by Congress in the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. FLPMA, as it's commonly known, aims to strike a balance between resource extraction and conservation. Specifically, the law directs BLM to focus on the, quote, management of the public lands and their various resource values so that they are utilized in the combination that will best meet the present and future needs of the American people, unquote. The intent is clear. Public lands must be managed in a manner that ensures the development and extraction of natural resources while preserving their long-term value for future generations of Americans. As I've said throughout my tenure as ranking member of this subcommittee, and I think it bears repeating today, our public lands are a public good managed on behalf of all Americans. They support a wide range of uses, from mining and oil and gas development to recreation and the ongoing preservation of our shared natural and cultural heritage. Ensuring the enduring protection of the natural world is a key component of BLM's mission. That's why in 2009, Congress formally recognized the National Conservation Landscape System, which encompasses 32 million acres, including national monuments, national conservation areas, wilderness study areas, wild and scenic rivers, and national scenic and historic trails. Making up about 13% of the total land managed by the BLM, the National Conservation Lands are the crown jewels of the agency's portfolio, and we have a responsibility to make sure these unique sites receive the protection they deserve. They provide clean air, clean water, recreation opportunities, and critical habitat for wildlife, which is why it is so important for this committee to partner with agencies like BLM to identify conservation and preservation opportunities. A recent report by Conservation Science Partners and the Center for American Progress demonstrates why these designations under the National Conservation Landscape System are so important. According to the report, between 2001 and 2011, natural areas and open spaces in the West disappeared at the alarming rate of a football field every 2.5 minutes because of new development. Given these findings, identifying opportunities to protect public lands is a responsibility we cannot afford to ignore. 2 of the bills in our agenda today will add existing parcels of public land, that is land already held by the federal government, to the California Coastal National Monument, a unit of the National Conservation Land Systems. Both H.R. 3565, introduced by Representative Capps, and H.R. 4233, introduced by Representative Rohrabacher, provide us with an opportunity to work collaboratively on a bipartisan basis to protect the coastal monument and expand recreation and tourism opportunities. I also look forward to hearing from our colleagues Representative Noem and Representative Walden on their respective pieces of legislation. The Senate has already approved their version of Representative Noem's bill through the bipartisan energy legislation, and I hope that this committee can quickly send her version to the full House of Representatives for approval. I also look forward to hearing about Representative Walden's legislation to address wildfire mitigation efforts and other conservation goals put forward by local stakeholders in that community. With that, I yield back, and I look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair. H.R. 3565, as we've heard, will expand the California Coastal National Monument by approximately 5,880 acres, adding 5 new areas in 4 California counties. And as we've discussed the input of local stakeholders, I know that we have 4 members of Congress who certainly do represent those communities, Congressman Huffman, Congresswoman Capps, Congresswoman Eshoo, and Congressman Rohrabacher, who represent these districts that contain these parcels and have worked very hard to make sure that their constituents support this proposal. In fact, I have a letter here from Representative Eshoo, who represents the addition in Santa Cruz County, which outlines some of that support, and I ask unanimous consent that her letter be entered into the record.
Without objection.
But I'd like to move on to On to you, Chief Hoffman. In the management of public lands throughout the West, collaborative input from stakeholders is critical to help Congress and the land management agencies make better, more informed decisions. And I understand that there was a collaborative group of stakeholders known as the Crooked River Ranch Wildfire, and I think you have to take the cake on that name, and Wilderness Working Group working to address the management of this area, including concerns about wildfire. In fact, the committee received numerous letters from members of this working group, who I'm sure you know, who are concerned that the bill we are reviewing only addresses one aspect of the considerations under review. So I have letters from the Oregon Natural Desert National Association, Friends and Neighbors of the Deschutes Canyon area, Friends of the San Pedro River, the Pew Charitable Trust, just to provide a sample, and I ask unanimous consent that they be entered into the record.
Without objection.
So, Chief Hoffman, can you tell me about the involvement, your involvement with this group?
Yes, thank you. We had several different agencies come together, and we were looking on resolution to how we can come up with a cooperative effort. Unfortunately, those fell apart last year, and when it wasn't moving forward, and we felt it was a priority to take care of the fire situation. Not discounting any of the work that the group was doing, but the fire priority in the area took precedence over that.
And it's my understanding that the proposal developed by the working group envisioned a legislative package that would include measures to improve wildfire mitigation. That was very much a part of the discussion as we are discussing today, along with permanent wilderness designations and other special management areas to ensure lasting protection for the numerous natural, scenic, cultural, and recreational resources in the region. You're so fortunate to have them. Are there stakeholders who've been involved in that work who would support the inclusion of additional measures in this bill to address some of those related management concerns?
If you're asking if the members of that working group were supportive of the steps that we're taking today, yes.
And would they be supportive of going back to the table to include additional measures perhaps in this legislation?
I'm sure that they would.
And can you imagine what those additional additions might be?
Yes.
And what might they be?
They would like to include the wilderness area into legislation to have it move forward.
And is that a goal you share eventually?
My goal is the risk of fire on the ranch and the timeliness of legislation on wilderness moving through government. I'm not confident in. I feel more confident in moving this forward at a faster pace to protect the
And that is
citizens.
your responsibility, is it not?
That's my responsibility.
As fire chief?
That's the main thing I'm looking at.
And I assume you'll go back to the table to work on some of these other issues related to wilderness designation.
As a fire chief, that would be as a citizen. I would have to make that decision if I was going to sit down and support that. And I don't not support wilderness. I want that understood.
You don't not support it.
Yeah.
You see a
Don't
value
not.
in it.
I see the value in it in certain circumstances.
Thank you, and I yield back.